Centuries before European scientists documented their discoveries, West African healers were already performing sophisticated inoculations, saving countless lives from smallpox. They were not just treating illness, they were pioneering preventative medicine with a mastery of immunology that would redefine public health worldwide long before the so-called Age of Enlightenment. Today, we're unearthing the profound, often deliberately overlooked story of how ancient African medical knowledge championed the fight against one of humanity's deadliest diseases. This hidden truth will force us to fundamentally reconsider the origins of scientific innovation and the very timeline of global medical progress. For generations, you've likely been taught a very specific narrative about the eradication of smallpox. The story typically begins in rural England in the late 18th century with a country doctor named Edward Jenner. He observes that milkmaids exposed to cowpox rarely contract smallpox. From this observation, the textbooks tell us, he develops the world's first vaccine. It's presented as a triumph of European enlightenment and individual genius, a moment when Western science stepped forward to rescue humanity from a terrifying plague. This account, deeply embedded in our collective understanding, positions Jenner as the sole visionary, the genesis point of modern vaccinology. It's a compelling, elegant story, often illustrated with idyllic scenes of idyllic farms and dedicated physicians. We're taught that the scientific method, as we understand it, emerged from these intellectual traditions, bringing light to the darkness of disease. The sheer scale of smallpox's devastation across continents makes Jenner's reported breakthrough seem almost miraculous. Imagine a world where every generation faces a viral foe that could disfigure, blind, or kill up to 30% of its victims, a disease so pervasive it shaped demographics and even the course of wars. The arrival of a preventative measure would be nothing short of revolutionary. But what if that revolution had already been happening for generations, thousands of miles away, its architects uncredited? Before we plunge deeper into the startling evidence, if you find this journey through history as vital as I do, perhaps consider a quick pause. Sharing these forgotten narratives, like the true origins of inoculation, helps our community grow and signals to the platforms that these crucial stories deserve a wider audience. A simple subscription and a comment telling us what you learned here truly fuels our expeditions into history's hidden corners. Now, back to the silent pandemic that gripped the world and the knowledge that was already confronting it. The established narrative, for all its power, overlooks an astonishing reality. The practice of purposefully inducing immunity to smallpox was not discovered by Jenner. It was a sophisticated medical technique that had been practiced for at least a century and quite possibly much longer in various parts of Africa and Asia before it ever reached European shores. This isn't merely a footnote, it's a foundational shift. The true story, the one conspicuously absent from most history textbooks, centers on an enslaved West African man named Onesimus. His name should echo through the annals of medical history with the same reverence as Jenner's, perhaps even more so. In the early 18th century, Onesimus arrived in Boston, purchased by the prominent Puritan minister Cotton Mather. When Mather asked Onesimus about his medical knowledge, a common practice at the time, Onesimus shared a remarkable truth from his homeland. He explained that in Africa, people deliberately infected themselves with a small amount of pus from a mild smallpox case. He described scratching a small incision, often on the arm or leg, and rubbing in the viral material. This process, known as variolation or inoculation, would typically lead to a mild form of the disease, ensuring lifelong immunity without the devastating risk of natural infection. This was not folk magic. This was applied immunology. Mather, initially skeptical but deeply concerned by Boston's devastating smallpox epidemics, listened. He found that Onesimus's account was corroborated by other enslaved Africans, all describing this exact same highly effective practice from their home countries. Think about that. A preventative medical technique, sophisticated enough to control one of the deadliest scourges in human history, was common knowledge in West African communities. It was brought to the Americas not by European scientific expeditions, but by the horrific forced migration of enslaved people. The evidence isn't confined to Mather's diaries. Across the Atlantic in the Ottoman Empire, Lady Mary Wortley Montagu wife of the British ambassador, observed similar variolation practices in Constantinople in the early 1700s. She actively championed its introduction to England, writing passionate letters describing how a small scratch could protect against the cruel fate of smallpox. She observed the practice firsthand among the women there, a tradition that had long roots in various parts of Africa and Asia. The Royal Society, Britain's premier scientific institution, initially resisted, but the efficacy was undeniable. The knowledge, however, didn't originate in Constantinople either. It had traveled, adapted, and proved its worth over generations. The startling revelation is that this medical breakthrough wasn't discovered in Europe and then exported. It was imported into Europe, largely through the direct testimony and practical demonstrations of African individuals and communities. This profound truth reshapes our understanding of medical history and challenges the very foundations of how we perceive scientific progress. The detailed descriptions provided by Onesimus and other enslaved Africans reveal a sophisticated understanding of disease transmission and immunity, centuries before similar concepts were theorized in the West. This wasn't guesswork. It was a calibrated, deliberate intervention based on observable outcomes and accumulated knowledge passed down through generations of healers. Imagine the careful observation, the meticulous practice, the deep understanding of the human body required to implement such a procedure safely and effectively across entire communities. Early European travelers too, though often blinded by colonial prejudices, recorded instances of variolation in their accounts from the Gold Coast and other West African regions as early as the late 17th century. These scattered mentions, often dismissed as exotic curiosities, now stand as powerful confirmations of a widespread and deeply ingrained medical tradition. This wasn't merely a localized practice, it was an integral part of public health strategies in many pre-colonial African societies, protecting populations and fostering community resilience against a devastating global pandemic. The implications are enormous. It means that while European science was grappling with rudimentary theories of contagion, African physicians were already executing practical, highly effective immunological interventions. It changes the very genesis point of a global medical revolution. This revelation fundamentally alters how we should view African history, moving beyond narratives of subjugation and toward a recognition of profound, world-altering innovation. It demands that we acknowledge pre-colonial Africa not just as a source of raw materials or labor, but as a crucible of scientific advancement, a place where empirical observation and practical medical expertise thrived. The contributions of African societies to global health and science have been systematically understated, marginalized, or outright erased, fitting them into a preconceived narrative of European intellectual supremacy. But the historical record, when truly decoded, tells a different story entirely. It is a story of independent scientific development, of medical practitioners whose knowledge was so advanced that it literally saved countless lives, even in the very societies that sought to enslave and diminish them. You now see the history of preventative medicine through an entirely new lens. It began not in an English meadow, but in the villages and healing traditions of West Africa, brought to the wider world by those who suffered the greatest injustices. When did your school textbooks ever tell you about Onesimus? If you want to easily revisit this stunning truth, the next time a conversation turns to the history of medicine, a quick like helps you bookmark this revelation. This groundbreaking story of African ingenuity is just one thread in the vast, complex tapestry of human achievement that history books too often leave unraveled. Stay with us as we continue to pull back the curtain on these monumental truths, digging deeper into the evidence that redefines entire civilizations and their legacy. To ensure you don't miss the next earth-shattering discovery we bring to light, subscribe to History Decoded now.